I never wanted to attend Victoria's engagement party. But my mother insisted, saying it was time to put the past behind us. If only she knew how the evening would unfold. Look who decided to show up. Victoria's voice carried across the elaborately decorated ballroom of the Madison Hotel. She stood in a cluster of perfectly coiffed guests, champagne flute in hand, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Well, my old first car. I smoothed down my simple black dress, Chanel's latest, though no one here would recognize it. At 28, I had learned to wear success quietly, letting others underestimate me while I built my empire from the shadows. "Hello, Victoria," I said politely, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Congratulations on your engagement." She gave me a once-over, her lips curling into that familiar sneer. "How sweet of you to come. Though I'm surprised you could afford to take time off from whatever it is you do." What I did was run Capital Ventures International, one of the largest investment firms in the country. But Victoria didn't know that. To her, I was still just the cleaning lady's daughter, the unwanted baggage that came along when her father married my mother 15 years ago. "I managed to clear my schedule," I replied mildly, thinking about the board meeting I'd moved to make it here. A meeting where we'd finalize the acquisition of a major tech company for $2.3 billion. "Everyone," Victoria called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "this is my stepsister, Elena. Her mother used to clean our house before Dad married her." The gathered guests, mostly Victoria's wealthy friends and her fiancé James's business associates, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some smiled politely, others didn't bother hiding their disdain. "Actually," I started to say, but Victoria cut me off. "Elena's always been so resourceful," she continued, clearly warming to her topic. "Remember when you used to help the housekeepers after school, Elena? Learning the family business." I remembered. I also remembered using those after-school hours to study the financial markets on my laptop, building the foundation of what would become my company. But Victoria had never bothered to ask what I was actually doing. "Those were interesting times," I said neutrally, sipping my champagne. Victoria's mother Margaret glided over, her face set in its permanent expression of polite disapproval. "Elena, darling. How unexpected to see you here. Victoria told me you were too busy with your little job to attend." My little job had just been featured in Forbes, though under my company's name rather than my own. I preferred to operate behind the scenes, letting my success speak for itself. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, watching Victoria preen as another group of guests arrived. "James," she called out, waving to her fiancé who had just entered with several older men in expensive suits. "Come meet some of my family." "Well, sort of family." James walked over, looking every bit the ambitious young executive in his tailored suit. He was a mid-level manager at Robertson Financial, one of the largest banks in the city. What he didn't know was that my company had just purchased a controlling interest in Robertson's parent company. "Elena," he nodded curtly, clearly having been briefed by Victoria about my supposedly humble status. "Victoria mentioned you might come. How's the job search going?" I bit back a smile. I had interviewed him myself last month, though he didn't know it. I'd been wearing one of my business outfits then, my hair up, projecting the image of the powerful CEO I was. He hadn't recognized me. People see what they expect to see. "Oh, I keep busy," I said vaguely. "Elena's always between jobs," Victoria explained to James loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "But she's very determined. Maybe you could put in a word for her at Robertson? I'm sure they need people in the mailroom." The irony was delicious. If only they knew that just yesterday, I had signed the papers that would make me James's boss's boss's boss. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said, watching more guests arrive. I checked my watch discreetly. Mr. Robertson himself would be arriving soon. I had specifically requested his presence tonight, though no one knew why. "Still wearing that old Timex?" Victoria smirked, noticing the gesture. "You should have told me you needed a new watch. I'm sure we could find you something more appropriate for professional settings, if you ever get into one." I glanced at my old Timex. Actually a custom Patek Philippe that cost more than Victoria's car. But again, people see what they expect to see. "It keeps time," I shrugged. Margaret rejoined the group, champagne in hand. "Elena, dear, perhaps you could help the catering staff? They seem a bit overwhelmed and you have experience in that area." Before I could respond, Victoria clapped her hands in delight. Oh yes, that's perfect. Elena knows all about serving at parties. Remember when you used to help your mom at our holiday gatherings? I remembered. I also remembered using those parties to network with Dad's business associates, gathering insights that would later help me build my company. But they had never noticed that part. Actually, I started again but was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. Mr. Robertson had arrived, along with several other senior executives from the bank. Victoria immediately straightened, nudging James. Darling, your boss is here. We should go greet him properly. Of course, James agreed, adjusting his tie nervously. Mr. Robertson is very particular about protocol. I hid my smile behind my champagne glass. Mr. Robertson was indeed particular about protocol, especially when it came to his new boss. Elena, Victoria called over her shoulder as they started to walk away, the catering staff is through those doors. Try not to break anything expensive. I stayed where I was, watching as Victoria and James approached Mr. Robertson. The older man was scanning the room, clearly looking for someone. His eyes found mine and his face lit up with recognition. Oh, I said softly to myself, this should be interesting. Victoria was in full charm mode, practically dragging James toward Mr. Robertson. Sir, we're so honored you could attend our engagement celebration. But Mr. Robertson wasn't paying attention to her. He was making his way directly toward me, his face showing a mixture of surprise and respect. Ms. Romano, he called out, using my professional name, my mother's maiden name, which I'd adopted for business. I had no idea this was your. Victoria and James had frozen mid-stride. The room had gone oddly quiet. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. It's about letting people realize their own mistakes in the most spectacular way possible. The silence in the room was deafening as Mr. Robertson approached me, completely ignoring Victoria and James. Ma'am, I didn't know this was your stepdaughter's engagement party, he said, his tone deeply respectful. If I had realized the connection, I would have. It's quite all right, Richard, I said smoothly, enjoying the look of utter confusion on Victoria's face. I preferred to keep things low-key. Low-key. Victoria finally found her voice. What's going on? Mr. Robertson, I don't understand. Mr. Robertson turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. Ms. Romano is the new majority shareholder of Robertson Financial's parent company. As of yesterday, she effectively owns the bank. James's face had gone completely white. But that's impossible. Elena is the CEO of Capital Ventures International, Mr. Robertson finished for him. One of the most powerful investment firms in the country. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up. No, she whispered. No, this has to be a mistake. Elena is nobody. She's just the cleaning lady's daughter? I supplied quietly. Amazing how people can surprise you, isn't it? Margaret had appeared at Victoria's side, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. But all these years you never said anything. Would you have believed me? I asked, genuinely curious. When I tried to tell you about my company's success, you assumed I was talking about a housekeeping service. The memory was crystal clear. Last Christmas, when I'd mentioned acquiring a new company, Victoria had patted my hand condescendingly and said, "That's nice, dear. Everyone needs their house cleaned." Mr. Robertson cleared his throat. Ms. Romano, about tomorrow's board meeting. Yes, of course, I nodded. I think it's time we discussed some changes in upper management. Starting with the executive training program. James looked like he might faint. He had been bragging all evening about his upcoming promotion through that very program. Victoria finally snapped out of her shock, her face contorting with anger. This isn't fair. You can't just walk in here and ruin everything. This is my engagement party. Ruin everything? I raised an eyebrow. I simply came to celebrate my stepsister's engagement as invited. You're the one who spent the evening telling everyone about my mother's former occupation. But, Victoria's voice cracked. But you're supposed to be nothing. You're supposed to be a failure. The room had gone deadly quiet again. Even Victoria seemed to realize she'd gone too far. Nothing. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let me tell you about nothing, Victoria. Nothing is what you knew about me while I built my company. Nothing is what you understood about success while you were playing at being important. And nothing, I took a slow sip of my champagne, is what's going to be left of James's career if you don't start showing some respect. You wouldn't, she gasped. Try me. I turned to Mr. Robertson. Richard, would you mind explaining to my stepsister what happened to the last executive who underestimated me? He coughed uncomfortably. They're managing a small branch in Alaska now. Victoria's legs gave out and she sank into a nearby chair. James looked like he was trying to calculate exactly how many levels of management existed between his position and mine. Elena, my mother's voice came from behind me. She had arrived late, still wearing her nurse's scrubs from her hospital shift. After years of cleaning houses, she'd gone back to school and achieved her dream of becoming a nurse. I thought you were going to wait to tell them. Sorry, Mom, I shrugged. But Victoria was so insistent on discussing family history I couldn't resist. Your mother, Margaret sputtered. Your mother is still a nurse? But with your money. My mother, I cut her off sharply, chooses to be a nurse because she loves helping people. Unlike some people in this room, she understands that true worth isn't measured by your bank account or social status. Mom stepped forward, her head held high. And I'm very proud of my daughter's success, though not as proud as I am of her character. Victoria stood up suddenly. This is still my engagement party. You can't just come in here and take over. Take over. I laughed softly. Victoria, I already have. The hotel we're standing in? I own it. The bank your fiancé works for? I own it. That designer dress you're wearing? I own a controlling interest in the fashion house that made it. James finally found his voice. Please, Ms. Romano. I had no idea. If I had known. That's exactly the problem, I cut him off. You never bothered to know. None of you did. You were too busy looking down on the cleaning lady's daughter to notice what she was building. I turned to the gathered crowd of guests. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Elena Romano, CEO of Capital Ventures International. Some of you may know my company better for its recent acquisition of Robertson Financial, or perhaps for our technology division's groundbreaking work in AI development. The silence was absolute as I continued. But to my stepsister Victoria, I'm just the cleaning lady's daughter. Funny how life works out sometimes, isn't it? Victoria made one last desperate attempt. Daddy will never allow this. When he hears. Your father already knows, Mom said quietly. Who do you think advised Elena on the Robertson acquisition? That was the final blow. Victoria collapsed back into her chair, mascara running down her cheeks. Now, I said, checking my watch. I have an early meeting tomorrow about the future of Robertson Financial. James, I suggest you update your resume. Victoria, I hear the local community college has an excellent business program. You might want to look into it. As I turned to leave, Margaret called out, Elena, wait. We can talk about this. We're family. I paused at the door. Family? Family doesn't humiliate each other at parties. Family doesn't mock honest work. And family certainly doesn't spend 15 years trying to make someone feel worthless. But we didn't know. Victoria sobbed. And that's exactly what you'll have to live with, I said. The knowledge that you spent years looking down on someone who now owns everything you aspire to. Mom linked her arm through mine as we walked out. Behind us, I could hear Victoria's wails and James's desperate attempts to salvage his career. Was that really necessary? Mom asked, but she was smiling. Sometimes people need to learn the hard way, I replied. Besides, I think the catering staff enjoyed the show. I nodded to the waiters who were trying to hide their grins. The next morning, my assistant brought me the society pages. The headline read, Rags to Riches, How the Cleaning Lady's Daughter Became a Business Mogul. Below it was a photo from the party, Victoria's shocked face as she realized who I really was. I cut it out and had it framed, hanging it in my office as a reminder that success isn't about proving people wrong, it's about proving yourself right. As for Victoria and James, last I heard they've postponed the wedding. Something about needing to reassess their priorities. Me. I just closed another billion-dollar deal. But don't tell Victoria, she still thinks I'm helping with the catering. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising so far above people that they can't help but look up to see you. Even if they have to crane their necks to do it.